Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. This is what a moderate case of COVID-19 looks like. And this is my moderate case. When you're an analyst, you don't want to become that what you're studying, but this time I kind of got caught. So it's the 4 stages I went through. The incubation of the virus, the emergence of the symptoms was the yellow. When I got hospitalized, when I went into the ER and they took me into the isolation room, and then the recovery time. And then on the left and the right are just, these are notional. I'm not a doctor. But this is feeling like a normal healthy. This means that symptom is in normal range. It feels fine. Then a normal sickness, then a bad sickness, then the worst I ever felt. And down here are all the freaking symptoms that are associated with COVID-19. And this is the real challenge, is I think there's been this proliferation of symptoms and people like, well, I've got a cough. Do I have COVID? It's, first of all, the caveat is it's probably different for every person. There's a lot of variation. But for me, first of all, I have a very good idea of when I got infected. So this is the timeline at the bottom. I had only been out of the house 3 times in March, and March 31st was the last time that I could have been infected. So I'm reasonable that I'm infected here. I had all the symptoms begin actually the 8th during the Ask Me Anything. I was actually, if you go back and watch that, you'll see that I'm not looking too well. I was actually highly nauseous while I did it. Had the finger on the disconnect button, so if I puked, I could disconnect. And after that was over, I went to sleep for like 17 hours. And you can see here how quickly a lot of things dropped immediately during that first wave of symptoms. But it wasn't cough. Cough was a couple days later. So it's body aches, it's fatigue, it's nausea. That dropped really fast. That the gastrointestinal issues tended to be leading indicators, where the cough was a lagging. I think we're still anchored to some of the information we had earlier in this. I'm not so sure that cough is all that important other than an indicator. And then the other ones began dropping too. During the symptoms, I was declining over time, but I wasn't too bad. And so Wednesday, they asked me anything. I did another Ask Me Anything on Saturday where I revealed that I was presumptive. And then on Sunday, I really began crashing. And this is actually now what's referred to as the 5 to 9 day window. Or you'll hear the second week crash. These are where everything begins to fall apart. So I don't remember much of the week actually after Sunday. I know I did a little video on Wednesday to say hi, but I was crashing all over. And on Thursday, I had, by the way, shout out to everyone who was checking in on me and monitoring. You know who you are. It was really appreciated. It was very, very helpful to have folks checking in and kind of keeping an eye on me, because on Thursday I had 3 different people tell me I needed to go to the hospital, one of whom is an infectious disease specialist. So I went to the hospital, and that was right here. And you can see that as I got in there, some symptoms began improving, and it's a time thing. You know, they say the 5 to 9 day window, if you have a moderate case, or what I called radically mild. I don't think I was severe, even though I was hospitalized for 5 days. Maybe that qualifies as severe, but I wasn't like coughing up blood or anything. I was in an isolation room. I was completely out. I called it corona coma. My body put me in a coma, and I would sleep for like 16 to 18 hours a day. I would just be out. But some of the symptoms began improving immediately. But notice up here at the top, this green line, that's my fever. I never once spiked a fever, not once. I got up to like 100 once, but never 100.4. So a lot of the guidelines, even when I got in the hospital, the guidelines when I entered the hospital is, do you have a fever? If you don't have a fever, you probably don't have COVID. So I took a drive-through test. I got a transportation assistant and went through one of those drive-through tests on the 15th, got a positive confirmation on the 18th, and I was released or discharged mid-April. Where was I? It was weird. So I went into this hospital before they even had COVID places in place. They were sort of building that up. They put me, and it probably helped, in a isolation room that was in a cardiovascular ring. So I was in a completely isolated room. I spent most of the time actually talking with the doctors. If they weren't coming in giving me shots or drawing blood or doing the test, I was talking to them through a phone, through a window, like in prison. And I have some pictures. I may put up some pictures. I actually, and you know why? Because it's an isolation room. They have to put on PPE to come in, and you could tell they were conserving the PPE. So a couple things from the hospital experience that are kind of noteworthy. I never was put on oxygen, even though I had very low oxygen, and that is a standard protocol. I found out later they were preserving their oxygen supplies and doing triage, and figured, well, he's not crashing, he seems to be doing okay, we're going to keep him under observation. But they were making decisions about conserving their resources. Same with PPE, in that they would, you know, eventually I learned there's the EKG monitors, all that stuff on you, all the different wires that keep you tracked. I learned how to reattach mine and sort of reset the device so they wouldn't have to come in and do it. You know, we tried to work out so that they could enter the room as least times as possible and use up that PPE as little as much. And again, I call it a moderate case. I was able to help myself here a little. But this recovery, this is the part where people don't get. If you've been watching me on Facebook, I have been out of it for a good 2 weeks now. The corona coma did not start leaving until Monday of this week, and I've had 2 days so far this week where all I did was sleep. I think the closest thing I can compare it to is like mono. If you've ever had mono or known someone who has mono where they're just asleep or fatigued for a tremendous amount of time of the day, that's what corona coma feels like. And I had, you know, when I was in the hospital, I had the cough with the death rattle wheeze and the low oxygen and all that. But I think the defining characteristic for me, at least, is this fatigue and how slow the recovery's been. I've never been to the point where my body shuts down for, you know, that length of time. Rory, is there a test that indicates a discharged patient is not carrying the live virus? The criteria to discharge me was the resolution of the major symptoms and the stabilizing. I was still fatigued. I still had corona coma. I've spent the last week and a half still having corona coma. Now, what is a recovered definition? I think I was recovered as soon as I met the hospital, because the CDC, the definition they had is, have you had a fever in the last 3 days? Have these limited symptoms cleared up, and like nausea, things like that. And I still have fatigue and cough, so I don't know if I'm recovered. When you look at the research groups like the serology, they won't even touch you unless you've been 14 days clear of symptoms plus a negative test. So, and that's because you're going into research and your blood may be given to someone else. So they really want to be careful. If you don't have a negative test, they're saying 28 days plus after symptoms are clearing. So there's different standards. So it's been a wild experience, and I'll continue sharing updates. I'm registered for several research, the serology research with the blood donation. I'm registered for those. I'll share updates on that. But I think it's important for people to realize even a moderate case, right? I didn't go on a ventilator. I wasn't incubated. I'm not dead, obviously. Those are serious cases. So when we say, well, we'll just go out and get it and be fine, I was walking 15 to 20 miles a day up through March. Those of you watching me know I broke my treadmill. I walked it so much, I actually broke the treadmill. But I have been walking this week only. So 3 weeks after this started, I have been walking in the yard and around the neighborhood. I'm up to about a block, 2 blocks now. My endurance capacity is not backed by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think there's a real concern here that people are still associating this with the flu. And we shouldn't, because it's a different, it's novel, we don't know. A flu, when you're over, unless there's a serious complication. This has a lot of lingering conditions. Now, fortunately for me, so far, all of them but fatigue and cough have resolved. The cough's minor, it's not major. The fatigue is getting better, so I'm on the track. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.